There's a strange silence that surrounds the topic of women who have no friends. People often assume loneliness means failure, as if your worth is tied to the number of names in your contact list. But the truth is more complicated. Sometimes a woman with no friends is not broken, not bitter, and not unlovable. She might be stronger, wiser, and more self-aware than anyone can imagine. Today, let's uncover what her life really reveals. There comes a moment in a woman's life when she realizes that her inner calm is worth far more than social validation. In her younger years, she might have tolerated the constant noise, friends who kept her phone buzzing late into the night, conversations laced with subtle judgment, invitations that felt more like obligations. She may have convinced herself that being surrounded by people was always a good thing, that silence meant isolation, and isolation meant failure. But over time, she discovered a deep truth. Not every connection nourishes you, and not every presence brings peace. This awakening doesn't happen overnight. It comes slowly, like a curtain being drawn back, revealing that sometimes the people closest to you are the very ones disrupting the peace you desperately need. When she first begins letting go of certain friendships, it feels almost unnatural, like she's defying an unspoken rule of society. We're taught to collect friends like trophies, to measure our worth by the size of our social circle. But she notices something: the fewer people she keeps in her life, the quieter her mind becomes. There's less gossip, less petty drama, fewer arguments over things that don't matter in the grand scheme of life. She no longer wakes up with the dread of checking her messages, anticipating the emotional mess waiting for her. In place of that anxiety, she feels a lightness, a breathing space she never realized was missing. She starts to see that peace isn't just the absence of conflict, it's the presence of safety, comfort, and emotional clarity. Peace, she learns, is not passive, it's active. It's something she must guard fiercely, like a treasured possession. And so she becomes selective about who gets her time and emotional energy. When a friend's presence feels heavy, draining, or tense, she takes note. She doesn't need to confront everyone or create dramatic exits. Sometimes she simply stops engaging in certain conversations. Sometimes she declines invitations without lengthy explanations. And sometimes she walks away completely. It's not about arrogance or coldness. It's about self-preservation. She understands that every yes to someone who disturbs her peace is a no to her own well-being. This shift also changes the way she views herself. For years, she might have believed she was difficult, sensitive, or even antisocial for craving space. But now she sees her desire for peace as a sign of emotional maturity. It means she values her mental health enough to protect it, even if it means being misunderstood. There's a confidence that comes with this, a steady knowing that she doesn't have to justify her boundaries to anyone. Those who truly respect her will never make her feel guilty for needing quiet. And those who don't, well, they're exactly the people she's better off without. Her days begin to take on a different rhythm. Instead of constant social noise, she spends more time doing things that genuinely restore her. Reading, walking, creating, resting. She notices small joys again, the way her coffee smells in the morning, the sound of rain against the window, the peace of an uncluttered mind. She realizes she can hear her own thoughts more clearly now, unfiltered by other people's opinions. This clarity helps her make better decisions, not just about relationships, but about her work, her goals, and her future. She no longer rushes into situations out of fear of missing out. She chooses carefully, deliberately, guided not by external pressure, but by what feels right deep inside her. What's most striking is how peace reshapes her sense of identity. She no longer defines herself by who she knows, but by how she feels when she's alone. She doesn't chase connections to fill a void. She builds them to share abundance. When people enter her life now, it's not because she needs them to complete her. It's because they add beauty without taking away harmony. In learning that peace is priceless, she has traded the illusion of companionship for the reality of emotional safety. And once she has tasted this kind of stillness, she knows she will never go back to a life where her spirit is constantly unsettled. There was a time when she believed that having a large group of friends was a sign of a good life. Social media made it worse. Endless photos of big gatherings, group vacations, and crowded birthday tables convinced her that being loved meant being surrounded. But over time, she began to notice something unsettling. The size of her circle didn't always match the depth of her connections. Some friends only showed up when it was convenient. Some smiled in her presence, but spoke differently behind her back. And some didn't truly know her at all, despite years of shared memories. She realized that numbers mean nothing if the people counted don't genuinely care. That's when she began to understand it's not about how many hands you can call on. It's about how many will actually hold you up when you fall. The shift from quantity to quality wasn't easy. At first, trimming her circle felt like failure. She questioned herself, am I too picky, too sensitive, too hard to please? But deep down, she knew this wasn't about being selective for the sake of pride. It was about emotional survival. She had given too much of herself to people who never reciprocated, pouring her energy into relationships that were one-sided. It took heartbreak, disappointment, and countless small betrayals for her to finally draw a line. Now, she refuses to keep anyone in her life simply to fill space. She would rather have one deeply loyal friend than 20 who disappear when life turns difficult. Quality, she learned, has a different rhythm. True friends don't need constant contact to prove they care. They don't keep score of favors. They don't vanish when your life is messy. Instead, they are steady, consistent, and present when it matters most. A quality friendship feels like a safe place to be unfiltered, to share your fears, failures, and flaws without the fear of being judged or used. It's not about perfection. It's about authenticity. And she knows that these kinds of bonds are rare. They are built slowly, tested over time, and strengthened by mutual respect. This new way of valuing relationships also changed how she invests her energy. Instead of scattering it across a dozen shallow connections, she focuses on nurturing the few that truly matter. She listens deeply, remembers the details that others forget, and shows up with genuine intention. She doesn't stretch herself thin trying to be everything to everyone. Instead, she gives her best to those who give their best back. The return on that investment is more than emotional safety. It's joy. It's the comfort of knowing that the people in her life actually see her, not just the version of her that is convenient for them. Letting go of the more is better mentality has also given her the freedom to walk away without guilt. She no longer feels obligated to maintain connections that have expired. If a friendship becomes toxic, manipulative, or emotionally draining, she allows it to fade without forcing a dramatic confrontation. She understands now that not all endings need to be battles. Some are simply quiet acknowledgments that the relationship no longer fits who she is. And in that quiet release, she makes room for better things. By closing the door on what's hollow, she opens space for something real to walk in. Her life is less crowded now, but it feels fuller. Conversations are richer. Moments feel more meaningful. When she spends time with someone, it's because she truly wants to, not because she's afraid of being left out. She doesn't chase invitations, she cherishes presence. The world may still measure popularity by how many people are around you, but she has learned to measure it by how deeply someone stays with you. And that shift has transformed the way she loves, trusts, and connects, because for her, it will never be about how many friends she has, but how many hearts she can truly call home. There was a time when she said yes to everything, every favor, every event, every conversation, every emotional crisis that wasn't hers to carry. People praised her for being dependable, for always being there, but they didn't see the cost. She would go home drained, her mind buzzing with other people's problems, her body heavy with exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix. Back then, she thought that being available to everyone was a sign of kindness. Now she understands it was a slow erosion of herself. Protecting her energy became less of a choice and more of a necessity, the only way to stay whole in a world that constantly takes. Learning to guard her energy started with small acts of resistance. She began to pause before agreeing to things, asking herself, does this serve me or drain me? At first, the guilt was overwhelming. Declining invitations felt like rejection, and saying no to someone's request felt like she was letting them down. But over time, see that every time she said yes to something that harmed her peace, she was actually saying no to her own well-being. That awareness shifted everything. She stopped giving automatic access to her time, attention, and emotions. Instead, she learned to filter, to decide who truly deserved a seat at her table and who only showed up to take without giving back. Part of protecting her energy meant reevaluating conversations. She used to tolerate endless gossip, negativity, and emotional dumping because she didn't want to seem rude. But now she notices how these interactions leave her feeling. If she walks away from a conversation feeling heavier, smaller, or more anxious, she recognizes it as a red flag. She doesn't argue or defend herself. She simply withdraws her energy. Sometimes this means excusing herself from a room. Sometimes it means creating more distance between herself and certain people. Protecting her energy isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling her exposure to what doesn't serve her. Boundaries became her greatest tool. Not the soft, uncertain boundaries she once had, the kind people could easily step over, but firm, clear ones that she enforces without apology. She communicates them calmly, without anger, because they're not about punishment. They're about preservation. If someone gets offended by her boundaries, she sees it as a sign that they benefited from her lack of them. She no longer takes that personally. She knows that people who value her will respect her limits, and those who don't were never truly invested in her well-being to begin with. Protecting her energy also means protecting her mental space. She became intentional about what she consumes, the news she watches, the conversations she entertains, the online spaces she spends time in. She understands that energy isn't just drained by people, it's also affected by what she allows into her mind. If something leaves her feeling hopeless, anxious, or angry without purpose, she steps back. She chooses her input carefully, knowing that her thoughts shape her emotions and her emotions shape her actions. By curating what she allows in, she creates an inner environment where she can thrive. Perhaps the most powerful change is that she no longer feels the need to justify her self-protection. She doesn't explain why she didn't respond immediately or why she chose not to attend a gathering. She doesn't offer excuses or long-winded explanations. She understands that protecting her energy is a form of self-love, one that doesn't require permission or validation. And in honoring that truth, she has discovered a deeper strength, a resilience that comes from knowing her worth and guarding it fiercely. Her life may not be as socially crowded as it once was, but it is infinitely richer, calmer, and more aligned with who she truly is. Growth is rarely loud, but it's always transformative. For her, outgrowing her old circle didn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It was gradual, almost invisible at first. She began noticing subtle differences between herself and the people she used to feel completely aligned with. Their conversations, once engaging, now felt repetitive. The topics that used to excite her no longer held her attention. It wasn't that they had changed drastically. It was that she had. The dreams she once shared with them had evolved. Her priorities shifted, her values deepened, and the version of herself they knew no longer existed in the same way. At first, she tried to shrink herself to fit back into those spaces. She laughed at jokes that no longer resonated. She entertained gossip she didn't care about. She went along with plans she didn't enjoy, hoping the connection could still feel the same, but pretending to be the woman she used to be became exhausting. Each time she did it, she felt a little more disconnected, not just from them, but from herself. Eventually, she realized that holding on to a friendship purely out of nostalgia is like wearing shoes that no longer fit. They might still look fine on the outside, but on the inside, they hurt with every step. Outgrowing people doesn't mean you stop caring about them. She still wishes them well. She still appreciates the memories they shared. But she understands that some relationships are tied to specific seasons of life. And when that season changes, so does the connection. She no longer feels guilty for creating distance. The truth is, they might not even notice the gap in the same way because they're on their own journeys too. It's not betrayal, it's evolution. Sometimes two people can both grow, just not in the same direction. This process also taught her the importance of alignment. She learned that being close to someone geographically or historically doesn't mean being close emotionally. True connection comes from shared values, mutual respect, and the ability to grow alongside each other. If someone resists her growth, mocks her new goals, or tries to pull her back into an outdated version of herself, she recognizes that as a sign, the relationship no longer serves either of them. Instead of fighting to keep what's fading, she now chooses to invest in connections that meet her where she is and challenge her to go further. There's grief in this kind of letting go. She's had to mourn friendships that felt like family, the inside jokes that no longer make sense, and the routines that once brought comfort. But alongside that grief, there's also relief, the relief of not having to edit herself anymore. She can speak freely about her dreams without fearing judgment. She can share her struggles without worrying about them becoming gossip. She can live without the subtle pressure to conform to an old version of herself. In losing people who were tied to her past, she gains space for those who will walk with her into the future. And with that space comes possibility. She now approaches friendships with openness rather than desperation. She's no longer seeking people to fill the silence. She's seeking people who understand the silence. The old circle may have been part of her foundation, but it doesn't define her anymore. She carries the lessons, the memories, and the love they once gave her. But she's no longer afraid to step into new rooms, meet new souls, and create new bonds that match the woman she has become. Outgrowing her old circle wasn't an act of abandonment. It was an act of self-respect, and it's one of the quietest yet most powerful revolutions of her life. Self-reliance wasn't something she sought out from the start. In her younger years, she believed that strength came from having people you could call at any hour, friends to vent to, shoulders to lean on, and a network that could catch you when you fell. And for a time, she had that. But when life's storms hit hardest, she learned that sometimes the people you expect to show up simply don't. Some were too busy, some didn't know what to say, and others disappeared completely. At first, the silence was painful. It felt like abandonment. But slowly, she began to see it differently, not as a sign that she was unworthy of support, but as an invitation to become her own anchor. The early days of self-reliance were lonely and uncomfortable. She had to teach herself how to navigate problems without the reassurance of others. She learned to sit with uncertainty, to make decisions without seeking constant validation, and to comfort herself in moments of fear. There were nights when she wished for a listening ear, but instead found herself talking to the walls or to her own reflection, trying to piece together the courage to keep going. It was during these moments that she discovered an inner voice, quiet but steady, that had been there all along, waiting to be trusted. With time, self-reliance became less about surviving and more about thriving. She realized that when you depend on others for your happiness, your stability is fragile. It can be shaken by someone else's absence, mood, or opinion. But when you learn to provide those things for yourself, you build a foundation that no one else can take away. She became her own motivator, her own encourager, her own caretaker. She learned to celebrate her wins without waiting for applause and to pick herself back up without waiting for someone to notice she had fallen. This kind of independence didn't make her cold. It made her grounded. Her self-reliance also reshaped her relationships. She no longer clung to people out of fear of being alone, nor did she tolerate mistreatment just to avoid solitude. She could walk away from connections that weren't healthy because she knew she would be okay on her own. That shift in energy attracted different kinds of people. Those who didn't see her as someone to fix or control, but as an equal. Self-reliance didn't make her unapproachable. It made her more discerning because she no longer needed anyone to complete her. Anyone in her life now is there by choice, not by necessity. There's also a quiet joy that comes with knowing you can depend on yourself. She found it in simple things, fixing something in the house without calling for help, managing her own finances with confidence, making a major life decision without asking 10 different opinions. These moments may seem small from the outside, but for her, they're powerful reminders of her capability. She understands now that self-reliance isn't about rejecting help altogether. It's about knowing you can stand without it. When support comes, she welcomes it, but she never waits for it before moving forward. Perhaps the greatest gift of self-reliance is the peace it brings. She no longer fears the what-ifs of life in the same way. What if someone leaves? What if no one shows up? What if I have to do it alone? She has already faced those questions and answered them with her own resilience. She knows that while people can enhance your life, they are not the source of your strength. That strength lies within her, woven into her every choice, every boundary, every quiet step forward. And because of that, she walks through life lighter, not because she carries less, but because she carries herself. For much of her life, she used the words loneliness and solitude interchangeably, assuming they were two names for the same hollow feeling. Back then, being alone meant something was wrong. She would fill her calendar with events, surround herself with people, and keep the TV on at night just so the quiet wouldn't swallow her. But over time, and often through pain, she discovered a profound truth. Loneliness and solitude are not the same at all. Loneliness is a hunger that gnaws at you, an ache for connection that feels out of reach. Solitude, on the other hand, is a conscious choice to be alone, not as an escape from the world, but as a way to return to yourself. The shift began when she stopped treating time alone as a punishment. In the past, a quiet weekend with no plans would have felt like rejection, like proof that no one wanted her. Now, she sees it as an opportunity. She has learned that solitude can be a rich, fertile space where she can think, create, heal, and simply breathe without the noise of outside expectations. In solitude, she can hear her own thoughts more clearly, and she has come to realize that her own company can be not only enough, but deeply fulfilling. This doesn't mean she's immune to loneliness. She still feels it sometimes, the sting of wanting someone to understand her, the longing for warmth in the spaces between conversations. But she no longer fears it. Instead, she treats loneliness as a signal rather than a verdict. It's a sign that she craves connection, and she now seeks it in ways that nourish rather than drain her. Sometimes that means reaching out to a trusted friend. Other times, it means leaning into solitude until the loneliness passes, trusting herself to meet her own emotional needs. Through solitude, she has also learned to differentiate between connection and proximity. You can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely if those connections are shallow or performative. On the other hand, you can be completely alone in a quiet room and feel deeply connected to yourself, to your thoughts.